Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm the Senior Exhibition Manager at MOD, and today I'd like to welcome our special guest Ani Liu, who's a research-based experimental artist and technologist working at the intersection of art and science. So we exhibited one of Annie's works, Biophilic Fantasies, as part of our Hedonism exhibition, and that formed the inspiration for our first ModCraft exhibit, which was part of Life Interrupted, where we invited people to join us in building a virtual community garden in Minecraft. So also joining me today with Annie is my colleague Kia.
Hi, I'm Kia and I'm an exhibitions coordinator at MOD. Annie, your exhibit in our galleries invited people to focus on how nature impacts their mental and physical health. How have you stayed connected with nature in the last few months?
First of all, thank you so much, Lisa and Kia, for having me here for the conversation. And I think that's such a good question because I live in New York City. I think notoriously the kind of concrete jungle. My husband and daughter and I live in this tiny apartment where all of our windows face brick walls. And I think I really took for granted how much time we spent outside of our home, like how often we went to the park, how important it was for us to kind of experience sunshine and in those domains. And then of course, early on during the pandemic, because we had such a small infant daughter, we wanted to limit our exposure to the crowds outside. And I think it was a moment where, first of all, I immediately grabbed my sun lamp back out. I had all these literally all these kind of fantasies about how we might bring more natural light into our house, including wondering if I could put up a mirror across the street on the building opposite ours to literally reflect more sunlight into our building. As you both know, I love plants, so there were plenty of plants in our apartment. It was kind of a strange time because my daughter was so young and she was so needy, and I was really having a hard time taking care of all of the living things in our house. And then all of a sudden, there was this kind of great global shift. I think a lot of actually what I ended up focusing on during the pandemic in terms of simulations in nature had a lot to do with human interactions. So like many people, I think there was a great deal of loneliness and desire for, I was lucky because I got tons of hugs and cuddles from my little one, but for instance, my mother had to be self-quarantined for 2 weeks, and she very much wanted to see our family, and all of our interactions were across a screen, and it was very palpable. It made me think a lot about the kind of needs we have as social mammals. Like I think in Biophilic Fantasies, I thought a lot about our evolution as animals in terms of our relationship to natural growing leafy things. But in this case, I was thinking a lot about the kind of innate desires we have as social beings to touch, to smell, to be in close proximity with each other, to be feeling like part of a community. And yeah, I don't know, I thought a lot about it. It was very interesting because all at once, we have these technologies, right? Such as Zoom, such as Skype, such as FaceTime. In many ways, we're more connected than ever before. But it was interesting to me to hear of reports of Zoom fatigue, or people really starting to think about how to host more effective meetings, how to kind of engage meaningfully, especially if, for instance, I think it's easier if you already met someone in quote unquote real life in person, but it's very difficult to meet someone for the first time on Zoom and carry out like working and things like that. So yeah, I think that it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I've been thinking a lot about the simulation of being together. And how that might be improved.
I think when you said about meeting people on Zoom, I know for those first, over that first kind of month, when everything was, only online, and there really was limited opportunities for going out and about. And so there were a few times where I had organized a Zoom hangout for an association that I was part of, and you'd see these new faces pop in, and it was, and you know, and I would think, oh, that's actually the first new person I've seen in 2 weeks, and that was literally the first face that I hadn't seen, that I didn't know, and that's incredible, because you just think every day you see all of these people, even just shopping or, you know, walking around, and to just not see any new people for such a long time, it really made an impact on me, reflecting on that, when you did get the chance to kind of speak to some fresh faces,
Right.
even if it was via Zoom.
No, totally. And I've been to several commencements now via Zoom, and I really lament that the graduating seniors all across the world, so many of them had to have their graduations on Zoom, because especially in moments where it should be a thunderous applause, you know, like there's just a lot of emojis and hand waving on the screen. And I know that everyone is incredibly proud and happy for the accomplishments of this graduating class, but there's something, you know, it's not quite like that kind of, there's an energy to lots of people gathering, I guess. And I was thinking a lot about that too, like how to properly celebrate. I also sadly also attended a funeral on Zoom. So it's been like it's interesting, right? Like life goes on, the cultural traditions go on, and then the technology we use adapts to it, or we adapt the technology to it.
Yep.
So yeah, I've been thinking a bit about how to make these very, I guess in some ways, incredible life moments meaningful. And then of course now with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's been interesting too to see how activism can be performed, of course, in real life with bodies protesting and marching, but also I think I see a lot of activism on social media in different ways that I hadn't seen before, which have also been very meaningful. So it continues to evolve and grow. Yeah.
So one of the things that was really interesting about when you were exhibiting the work, Biophilic Fantasies, was thinking about the ways in which we might design the spaces where we live and work to be able to make more of our engagement with the natural world. And so I was wondering if you've had any reflections on how the COVID shutdown might impact the way that we design our living and working spaces in the future.
Well, I think I've already seen a lot of different clever ways that people have adapted. There's a park in New York City, I think it's called the Domino Park, where on the grass, they've drawn big circles like in a grid across the grass, and then you see people naturally clustering their picnics in the circles. In the grocery store, in the hospital, there's different kinds of markings on the ground, like cement is lava, and then there's like little circles that encourage people to stay within. In terms of the workplace, it's a tricky one, I guess, because in typical real estate fashion, the goal is to fit as many people in as little square footage as possible. I think a lot of what I've been thinking about in terms of social spaces, places like schools and workplaces, is this kind of idea of, I don't know, like solidarity and how you get a vast population to cooperate with each other. Like, how do I encourage my fellow citizens and myself to kind of protect each other? Because I think that there's a lot of design interventions that you can have, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to, I think, culture and mindfulness. And I don't know, like, I think it's very natural these days for people to cover their mouths when they sneeze, for instance. And so I wonder in the future if it will be, quote unquote, very natural to wear face coverings or stay 6 feet apart. I don't know, I'm sure people are also working on all kinds of other things like sophisticated air filtration systems, or kind of, I guess we're already working on things like contact tracing. I saw that there's a kind of like co-working space in Brooklyn called, I think it's called the New Lab. And it's optional, but people who work there can wear a wristband that vibrates when you come within 6 feet of each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was hearing that people who did wear it became really aware of how often you are within 6 feet of each other. So it was a device that kind of taught someone these new protocols. Yeah. And then hand washing, I guess. It's been interesting seeing lots of different designers think about how to teach the public proper hand washing technique, and even like the shape of soap bars and the color and like the different fragrances that change over time to encourage you to do it for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, lots of interesting design interventions there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think before all of this happened, we just, quickly washed our hands, or we washed our hands with soap. But now, since COVID's happening, we really give thought about how we do wash our hands, and like under our fingernails and all of that sort of thing. I think for my 26 years of life, I have not washed my hands correctly since.
Well, yeah, I agree. It was kind of like a revelation.
Definitely. So how do you feel when we told you about the idea for creating a community garden in Minecraft inspired by your exhibit?
Actually, I was so excited. I immediately ran over to my husband and told him about it because he was a big Minecraft fan a few years back. I thought it was such a good instance, or such a good platform for a simulation in a way, because I think one of the key successes to a good, or maybe simulation is the wrong word, but the idea of this being an open-ended platform is very powerful. Like, people gather there. I think I even saw someone teach a math class there.
Yeah.
Because it's an open-ended world where you have some amount of agency. It's not quite like a screen that is just, panning over a fake forest or something like that. It's, I think the interactivity is very important, and the kind of agency. So I was really excited. I myself have never really been in Minecraft or played around with it, but it made me super excited to think about it.
Well, people made some incredible things. So we do have a gallery of some of the beautiful gardens and creations that people put together on the website, if people want to go and check out and see what some of those were. So we've now closed the realm that was hosting the gardens, and we're inviting people to the next part of the exhibit to see how we might rebuild after a catastrophic event. So that's the next iteration of the Modcraft exhibit.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So Annie, has this period given you any new thoughts or insights or perspectives for your art practice or your teaching, the work that you're doing at the moment?
I must say that I spent a lot of time thinking about how to shift my curriculum online. I was right in the middle of my semester when everything closed and I had to teach remote. And the course that I was teaching, it is a course that is half critical thinking and speculative design, and then the other half is teaching them practical skills like how to use the bandsaw, how to use digital tools like the CNC machine, the laser cutter, the 3D printer. And I feel so bad for them because we had just finished learning how to use all the tools, and they were just about to design their final projects with these new tools that they had learned. And then suddenly they no longer had access to them. But in thinking about the means of expression in the digital domain versus the physical one, I thought that was something really interesting to see them adapt. And then a lot of their final project ideas, I think, touched upon themes that I am currently also very interested in thinking about. So I think we talked about it a little bit. Things like how do you enhance this feeling of solidarity and community across the internet, across the screen? How do you recreate things like serendipity? Some of them were talking about how, they're relatively introverted, but they would go into the cafeteria and then they would, run into someone that they would know without actually having to make plans with that person. But, when you're quarantined at home in your own dorm or with your parents, there's no running into your colleagues anymore. We even talked about things like, in general, I guess the kind of anxiety that comes with performing a self on social media, like because everything became so virtual. There's a lot, I think my students are a generation where they were very, like they basically grew up with many social media profiles. And I was really surprised to hear how much anxiety and stress this caused too, because it's a constant kind of curation of self, which I hadn't really thought about. And then there were some really fun things too, like they were talking about dance parties that they would host on Zoom and how they could potentially make those better with technology. We talked about silly things too, like how every time you're in a Zoom meeting, you kind of have to look at yourself too.
Yeah.
And how that makes you really self-conscious, and you would never generally have interactions like this with a mirror on the other side. So yeah, I think all of those things are things that I've been thinking about. And then just as an aside, I've also just been thinking a lot about motherhood and how much it has changed me as an artist. I've been thinking a lot about I guess lots of things to unpack there, but I've been thinking a lot about the history of feminist technologies as it relates to reproduction. And so, yeah.
Are you working on any new projects that you would like to share with us?
I just finished a type of, or I guess, sorry that I'm like pausing here. I just finished a kind of hackathon that was hosted by MIT Media Lab and Google Arts and Culture. And I was working with a really wonderful collaborator based in France named Marshall, and we created a piece. It's still in a kind of prototyping stage, but we were thinking about how we might prototype an emotional experience together. So we made this web applet where the camera on your computer reads your emotions and then generates like unique music based on your facial expression. And idea is like many people could log on, and based on the kind of sentiment or emotional state of a whole bunch of people, the music would get generated together. And I was very inspired in making this piece actually from singing lullabies every night to my daughter. I was thinking a lot about how anxiety is very high. I myself have been having a lot of trouble sleeping. And at first when I was researching how to go to sleep, I was like, looking at melatonin and like pills and all of these things. And then I realized like there's really ancient embodied forms of technology like meditation and breathing and lullabies. There's actually lots of research that show that singing to your child can help regulate heart rate and body temperature, all these amazing things that I'd never thought about. And so because we had the generous support of Google, we were interested in using machine learning maybe to look at lots and lots of lullabies to generate like unheard of kind of melodies that were unifying across cultures. We didn't get to that point. We did take a lot of inspiration from lullabies and we did feed it into the machine. But we were also talking about how instead of just having machine learning generate lullabies, we really wanted to have that kind of experience where when I sing to my daughter, I look at her face and I react to her needs, right? Like I think when you go to a really good concert, the performer feeds off the crowd and they adapt to the crowd. And we were thinking a lot about how can we do that in this kind of technological domain. So we settled with computer vision, and there's it's still nascent, but there's decent computer vision that reads your emotional state, which is both kind of surveillance creepy and kind of interesting. So we created this kind of applet that sings to you based on your face. And that's something that I've been working on.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'll send you a link later. It's still in a super hacky like prototype stage. And we're learning a lot about the limits of the technology, but it's been a really meaningful little hackathon because I think at the core of it, my desire would be to be able to have lots of people participate in something that is both emotional and hopefully soothing globally. Like I imagine just lots of people logging on. Oh, and your face is abstracted. It turns into just the lines of the eyes and the nose and the smile. So you can like not worry too much about looking fancy for the camera and things like that. Yeah, we thought a lot about these little interactions.
Well, that sounds so interesting. Thanks for joining us today, Annie. That was such a great conversation. Did you have any other thoughts, Lisa?
No, I think that was amazing. We'll definitely get the link from you for that applet that you were talking about so that we can share it with people. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.